Mykhaylo Mudryk, future Ballon d'Or winner and Arsenal superstar. Possibly, but maybe not. I'm not sure. Most of you would have seen his flashy highlights all over Twitter, all over YouTube, you know, him running at pace, but most of you won't have seen the general stuff in his play, the warts, you know, when he gives the ball away, the bad passes. So I have watched over an hour of Mykhaylo Mudryk content, including failed passes, attempted dribbles, defensive duels, all of that stuff, so I can give you an insight into the player. And of course, there's people who watch him week in, week out playing for Shakhtar who will know more than me, but this, I think, has given me a good insight into the player. Shout out the Arsenal Vision Boys, one of the best podcasts out there, who made this video possible. They did an in-depth scouting video, which is where I watched the footage. If you want to watch the footage, the link is in the description for their Patreon, and you can view the footage that I viewed to make this video possible. And they use a professional scouting platform called Y-Scout, where you can see every single action of every single player they've ever had. So I was able to watch this. I watched every touch from his performance against Real Madrid in the Champions League. I watched his best actions. I watched some clever passes. I watched some failed dribbles. Gooners, before we do get into it, please subscribe to this channel. It's the best Arsenal channel on YouTube. Yes, we're quite inconsistent, but we're trying to up the game and produce some, you know, high-level, highbrow content, so please subscribe. So firstly, I think the thing that everyone knows about Mudryk is his explosive pace. It's the thing that's made him stand out as a player. He jumps off the screen at you, and this is the most evident thing in his game when you watch any footage from him. In transition, he is absolutely explosive. He's very difficult to stop. One of the quickest players I've ever seen, I think. He's got sort of Theo Walcott early days vibes, and you can see that pace in every clip. He's actually recorded the quickest pace in the Champions League group stage this season, so if that isn't an indicator, you know, on the top level, he is just insanely quick. However, as we all know, having pace as an attribute isn't enough. You need to be able to know how to use that pace. Look at Dan James, who is quick, but he cannot do anything with that pace, really. Mykhaylo Mudryk in transition is frightening. The way he runs at defenders and glides past them purely with his pace. If you're looking at having a player who can come on when you've got a narrow lead and sort of play against tired legs on the counter, he is unbelievable in transition. He just sort of knocks the ball past players, drives past them, takes them out with, you know, one big touch, and he knows how to use that. He's also very good at receiving the ball down the touchline with his back to a defender and pinning them and turning them quickly and driving inside down the centre of the pitch. However, one symptom of being electric and having those heavy strides, I do think, is his heavy first touch. I think it's a symptom of that pace because, you know, he doesn't need to be as secure in possession, particularly when he's playing against poor Ukrainian players, particularly the defenders who aren't particularly mobile. And then, you know, you see him take these loose touches. It was really evident in the video. Some heavy touches. A lot of the time he gets away with it, but I do think that is a concern if he was to come to the Premier League and come to play for Arsenal. You don't get that time, you don't get that space. And that is a concern about his profile for me. We see every single clip, it's him thriving in transition or having a bit of space to manipulate the ball. There are question marks over his ability in tight spaces and because of his loose touch, and can he work it? Can he still do the same things that he does in terms of his dribbling and ball carrying? I'm not too sure about that aspect of his game. With regards to how Arteta likes his wingers to play, and we're looking at him potentially moving to Arsenal for a big fee, can he fit into that style? Can he do the sort of attacking patterns that Arteta drills into his wide forwards? With regards to the right-hand side, it's very different to our left-hand side, and the demands on our left winger are quite different in terms of the attacking patterns to our right-hand side. As you can see here, Bukayo Saka likes to receive the ball, and he's got Odegaard to connect with and play those little 1-2s, which the left-hand side doesn't necessarily have. You look at Saka driving forward here, and he often has that overlap with Ben White, who does sometimes provide that overlap. If it's not Ben White, then he will come inside, as I showed in the previous clip, and sort of combine with that connector in the right half space, which is Odegaard in this Arsenal team. However, what is asked of Gabriel Martinelli on the left-hand side is very different. His left 8 in Granit Xhaka plays in a very different way to Martin Odegaard. Martinelli will pick the ball up in this sort of position, and instead of having Odegaard as that sort of connector to, you know, play 1-2s with, or Jesus coming across like he does to Saka and Martinelli, to be fair, it's more Zinchenko hanging back and providing that, you know, backwards option, whereas Granit Xhaka likes to drive into that half space and make these sorts of runs. And that means Gabriel Martinelli has to be capable of playing those intricate balls into the half space for Granit Xhaka to run onto. It's something you see in every game. And that's something Mudryk would have to do if he was to come into this Arsenal side. From what I've seen in the clips, the consistency in which he's able to pull off these sorts of passes it's quite inconsistent. Sometimes he gets the weight wrong. Sometimes he overhits it. Sometimes he doesn't see the pass and he attempts a dribble and he gets crowded out. So that is an area of his game which he would need to drastically improve on if he was to come into this Arsenal team, because that is a demand of the left-sided player. Of course, another way of utilising that space that Granit Xhaka's runs creates is to come inside and take shots, and that is something we've seen from the footage. I think you've all seen it. You don't need to have watched this hour of footage, but it's something that's really, really common in his game. He likes to come inside. He's really, really good at striking the ball. He takes a lot of shots. That's reflected in the data. He's good. His natural instinct is to drive inside and, look to shoot or to play these sort of intricate patterns of play. Martinelli does often use that Granit Xhaka run as a bit of a decoy, so he can come inside, combined with Saka and Jesus and Odegaard. And that's something I can see Mudryk doing, because he's so good in that interior, in that half space, and sort of finding, intricate, decisive balls into those attacking areas. Another really common theme that we put our left forward into, and position we put them into, is isolating them with their fullback with very little help. And this is something Martinelli is really good at. He's become much better at sort of stopping the ball and then sprinting away from them on the outside and getting it to the byline, putting those cutbacks in. And this is something that Mudryk, I think, from the film, you can see he is capable of this element. His natural instinct is to drive into the space, and when you get the ball to him in that area, he can do that sort of Martinelli thing. He does it in a slightly different way. It's more about very direct, aggressive running rather than sort of the stop-start futsal type thing we see from Martinelli. So in terms of fitting into our system, I do think, as I said, those intricate passes are something you'd need to work on from what I've seen in this footage, in this hour of footage. But I think he's got the sort of one-on-one direct running. Of course, it's going to be more difficult against better defenders in the Premier League than he's facing in the Ukrainian league, but I'm not too worried about him in that aspect. It is the sort of intricate passing that I think he could work on. But in terms of sort of ball carrying, dribbling, and getting shots off, he can sort of do what Martinelli does, but perhaps even to a higher level. Maybe not right away, but in the future. He is really good at getting to the byline, and he likes this little clipped cross, which is something I saw a lot in these clips. With his left foot, he is quite two-footed, which is another aspect that Arteta really likes from his forwards. You look at Saka and Martinelli, they've both got pretty strong weak foots because they're both pretty capable of getting to the byline, which is something we see probably more from Martinelli now. I always like to look at data and see how that sort of builds a picture of a player and a narrative. I thought I wouldn't be able to find any Ukrainian data for the Ukrainian Premier League, but Scott Willis on Twitter, if you don't follow him, go and follow him. He does some great data visuals and radars, and he's provided this of the Ukrainian Premier League. And it sort of does just sort of reflect what you see in the footage, big goal threat, high shot volumes, brilliant dribbler, and ball carrier, a little bit insecure in possession, which is something he'll need to work on. Not a load of defensive work, but it's clear he's far too good for the Ukrainian Premier League, because that is his data for the Ukrainian Premier League. Just looking at the sort of surface level statistics, 11 non-penalty goals in 10.190s this season just demonstrates, how good he is in that league. It's ridiculous output, and he's just far too good for the Ukrainian league. There was also this slightly underwhelming data from the Champions League, which, also provided by Scott Willis, is slightly underwhelming, but I do think we have to sort of factor in the fact he was playing for a Shakhtar team that was up against Real Madrid and RB Leipzig in that group, and they had a lot of time not on the ball, so his sort of correlative stats, attacking stats, are going to be low, but he looks better on the defensive stuff. So I do think that it's a bit of nuance to take into looking at that data. For me, it is just the fee that is worrying. €100 million asking price, supposedly, from Shakhtar. I don't think they'll actually hold out for that, particularly with the players' pressure. He clearly wants to join us. He's posting about it pretty much every day on Instagram. I do think the Antony deal, that's what they said, the Shakhtar executive, one of them, he said, we think he's better than Antony. And, that has distorted the market. Unfortunately, United had to go and pay 80 million for Antony. I'm not sure he's better than Antony. I think it's very hard to say that from the conclusive evidence. At least Antony was playing in the Eredivisie, which we do question, but it's a significant step up from the Ukrainian Premier League. And let me tell you, I've seen and watched a lot of it in these clips, and the time and space you get in that league, the quality of the defending, and just the positional play from the opponents is just so low. Like it could be lower end Championship, even high end League One sort of level. Ultimately, you'd be investing in the pace and the raw talent, which could come good in the future. I'd just be a bit wary of how much does it move the needle for Arsenal this season. You're investing in the potential ceiling and not what he's done so far. I think he's played 2,590 career minutes, which is, basically nothing, to sort of warrant that transfer fee from that little game time. That small sample size is kind of mental for me. Could he be something special? Potentially. Does he drastically increase Arsenal this season, or Chelsea if he goes to Chelsea? I'm not sure. He needs refining, but I'd say he would provide Arsenal with better depth. Obviously, it's better to have him than no one in this summer, in this winter. It doesn't look like we're getting João Felix now, but it's a lot of money to spend on slightly extra depth for this season. But anyway, let me know what you think of Mudryk in the comments below, and watch our podcast. It's out, the Arsenal Cannon podcast. Obviously, check out the Arsenal Vision people because they made this possible. Shout out Elliot and Clive who did that scouting video. And yeah, look at all our socials in the comments. And yeah, hope you enjoyed and hope you have a better picture of what Mykhaylo Mudryk is as a player from someone who has now watched quite a substantial amount of him, and has looked at the data in depth and stuff. So yeah, cheers.